Okay, it looks like we've got a good group gathered. Other folks are still entering the waiting room, but we will welcome them as they join. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for attending the Sustainable Transportation and Climate Candidate Forum hosted by Move San Mateo, the San Mateo Climate Action Team, Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, and Acterra. I'm Lauren Weston, the Executive Director of Acterra, and we are a San Francisco Bay Area nonprofit based in Palo Alto that brings people together to create local solutions for a healthy planet. We focus on what you can do locally to engage in collective climate action. I've been invited by the San Mateo Climate Action Team, a volunteer-based San Mateo climate advocacy group, to ask the climate-focused questions at this forum.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Clarrissa Cabansagan. I'm the Development Director at Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. We are a nonprofit org that seeks to build healthier and more just communities by making bicycling safe and accessible for everyone in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. Move San Mateo is a volunteer-based San Mateo local team of the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition and has invited me to moderate the transportation-focused questions at this forum. I would first like to start off by acknowledging that today is Indigenous Peoples Day. Today, and on all days, we acknowledge that San Mateo is located on unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula.
Thanks, Clarissa. On Tuesday, November 8th, district-based city council elections will be held in the City of San Mateo Districts 1, 3, and 5. Mail-in ballots are already starting to be sent for this election. Climate change is an existential challenge of our times, and on-road transportation accounts for the largest source of emissions in the city by far. City council members have an outsized influence on our transportation system and climate emissions. Action, or failure to take action, on climate and transportation has a direct impact on local emissions, congestion, and traffic safety. Move San Mateo and the San Mateo Climate Action Team are hosting this Sustainable Transportation and Climate Candidate Forum for candidates to share their views and outline actions they would take to address these issues with our members and the general public. How can we build a more climate-friendly future with a safer and more efficient transportation system? And how can we implement other local solutions to the climate crisis that will protect the safety of our communities?
I want to take a second to introduce our candidates. From San Mateo District 1, which includes Baywood Aragon, San Mateo Park, and Hayward Park neighborhoods, we have candidate Lisa Diaz Nash. From District 3, Central San Mateo, we have candidates Rob Newsom, Sarah Fields, and Sergio Zygmunt. From District 5, Beresford Hillsdale, we have candidate Adam Loraine. We will do our best to get through the pre-drafted questions and take audience questions if time permits near the end of the evening. For candidates, you will be allowed 90 seconds for each response, in addition to a 1-minute opening statement. A timekeeper will hold up a card when you have 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and no seconds left.
I'm muted. I've got to remember to unmute myself each time. First off, we will allow each candidate to make a brief 1-minute opening statement. I'm going to call each candidate and you'll go individually. First is Lisa Diaz Nash from District 1.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. My name is Lisa Diaz Nash. I am running for San Mateo City Council District 1 to build safe, vibrant neighborhoods and ensure a diverse, inclusive, and welcoming community for all. My priorities will be: number 1, disaster preparedness focused on countering wildfires and sea level rise, 911 response, and public and school safety. Number 2, fixing our aging streets and infrastructure and investing in transportation solutions that will keep pace with San Mateo's evolution as a city. Number 3, affordable workforce housing. I offer proven results as a citywide leader at the forefront of addressing San Mateo's challenges and am deeply involved in many different areas of our community. I am proud and humbled to be endorsed by a broad community-based group of people and organizations, including Planned Parenthood Advocates Marmonte, the Sierra Club, the San Mateo Daily Journal, Congresswoman Jackie Spear, State Senator Josh Becker, San Mateo City Deputy Mayor Diane Pappen, Council members Eric Rodriguez and Joe Goethals. Thank you.
Second, we have Rob Newsom from District 3.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me today. My name is Rob Newsom. I am running for City Council in District 3 in San Mateo. I am a 24-year resident of District 3, and I grew up most of my life in San Mateo. I've been an active user of climate, getting outdoors. I was an Eagle Scout in Troop 42 in San Mateo, so I'm very familiar with all of our walking paths. I biked all through college and raced bikes in college. And I've worked most recently, before coming back into the printing industry, in the transit industry for a startup called Chariot for 2 years. So I'm familiar with a lot of the transit concerns that we have here on the peninsula, and particularly in our city of San Mateo. And I have concerns and thoughts about how to get San Mateo better for the future and improve our climate, be climate ready for the future. So a few things that I want to cover tonight. One is that, I want to make sure that we look at expanding the east-west transit corridor. Most of our transit corridor in San Mateo all runs north to south. That's a large problem. During the pandemic, we lost as well the East Bay Express, which was a vital connection between AC Transit in the East Bay and Samtrans and CalTrains in San Mateo. That's my time. So I'll see. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Sarah Fields, District 3.
Thank you and good evening. Thank you to all of our hosts and for the acknowledgement of Indigenous Peoples Day today. My name is Sarah Fields. I'm currently on the Parks and Recreation Commission here in the city of San Mateo, and my top priorities for my campaign are to develop a welcoming San Mateo that continues to be a wonderful place to live, work, and recreate. I'll bring a thoughtful and informed approach to development as a trained city planner, evaluating every project with consideration for community impacts, design, environment, and the law in mind. Fixing and updating our infrastructure, that includes repairing our streets, our sidewalks, and our storm drains as a top priority. And modernization also means planting native plants along our sidewalks and taking into account pedestrians, cyclists, cars, buses, and people of all abilities to be able to access our streets. I also want to reinvest in our parks. Of course, as a parks commissioner, I know our park system very well. We have an incredible master plan for parks, and we need to reinvest in those parks. Many of them were built out 5 or more decades ago. I enjoy the support of Planned Parenthood Advocates Marmonte, the Daily Journal, State Senator Josh Becker, Assemblymember Kevin Mullen, the majority of the current sitting San Mateo City Council, and many other regional leaders. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Sergio Zygmunt, District 3 as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sergio Zygmunt. I'm running for District 3 City Council. My main priority in my campaign is transit and housing. We can't have effective housing unless we have effective transit, and we can't have effective transit unless we have effective housing. My number one priority is improving first and last mile transit connections. So that means bikes and sidewalk, protected bike lanes and sidewalks. When I say protected bike lanes, I mean more than just a line on the ground. I mean proper protected bike lanes. Additionally, development is a critically important part of this election cycle. We need to make sure that we are able to meet our 7,800 housing unit guidelines that we need to meet within 8 years. And we need to do that right now. So, main things I want to point out are, we need to improve transit as soon as we can, including first and last mile connections, as well as our, housing development process. I do not have any special interest endorsements or donations, but I do have your best interests as my top priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergio. Lastly, Adam Loraine, District 5.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Loraine. I grew up here. I went to Aragon High School, went to college at San Mateo, lived in San Mateo the majority of my life. And my priorities, sustainability and infrastructure is the commission I sit on currently. It's the main reason why I'm running for city council. I want San Mateo to be as sustainable as it can be for this generation and future generations to come. I've had the privilege of being a part of our general plan subcommittee. And so my experience on committees and commissions over the last several years has gone toward the missions and aims of what I think we're going to be talking about tonight. In addition to preserving our neighborhood vitality, public safety and services, and representing all of District 5, leading by listening, my main focus in this race is to pursue affordable housing and transportation infrastructure to build a sustainable future for San Mateans. The climate crisis, as was mentioned, is the biggest challenge we have yet, but we have resources. We have an opportunity to make a better life for everybody going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
So candidate Nick Atkinson unfortunately could not attend today, but he has provided a written statement, which I will read now. Thank you, Move San Mateo and San Mateo Climate Action Team for inviting me and my fellow candidates to this forum. I am sorry to miss the live action tonight. I have signed the letter in support of decarbonization objective for San Mateo. On the subject of mass transportation in and around San Mateo, I would like to share with you my transportation story of the past week. I commute to San Francisco by motorcycle and have done so for the past 20 years. Riding a motorcycle as a primary means of transportation most likely indicates you are a frequent user of public transit. Motorcycles are not nearly as reliable as cars. Last week, I attempted to ride home from San Francisco. Unfortunately, someone used a bolt cutter to cut through the helmet lock and steal my helmet. Welcome to San Francisco. I walked to 4th and Townsend and took the 214 Express CalTrain to San Mateo. From there, I walked home. The next morning, I grabbed my spare helmet and returned to San Francisco on the 6:03 a.m. Red Line BART train. This is a typical experience in the life of a motorcyclist. It is evident that the unification of a diversified set of public transportation assets in the Bay Area is starting to come together, including the Clipper card and time schedules. This is a major step forward, but to truly have public transit corridors, we have much work to do. At this time, going from San Mateo to downtown San Francisco is not seamless. Too many transfers, too many gaps. We need to fix this. We also have to make sure public transit is clean and safe. I strongly support public transit and want it to work for all citizens, not just downed motorcyclists. Thanks, Nick, for this statement.
Candidate Rod Linares also couldn't be here today, but has submitted the following statement, which I will also read. Thank you very much for this opportunity and for your commitment to these critical issues. Climate change and transportation are intertwined in many ways. The more that these strategies address these issues can be related, the greater will be the effect of any policies that are implemented. The approach must be multi-pronged. Since 43% of greenhouse gas emissions, according to the 2020 CAP, come from on-road transportation, we must continue developing user-friendly ways to get people out of their cars and onto their bikes, feet, or public transit. Rather than the large buses that are currently used for public transit, perhaps an on-demand shuttle using more energy-efficient vehicles could be evaluated. In addition, the move to electric vehicles should be further incentivized since it's presently cost prohibitive for many. Another 42% of greenhouse gas emissions come from commercial, industrial, and residential environments. Working remotely could be formally encouraged as a permanent mode of work. Partnering with our local community colleges and unions to provide training and employee placement for low carbon jobs would be beneficial. The city would fund a group of community residents who could be energy conservation neighborhood ambassadors, working at the grassroots level to help with education and information. Enlisting schools and youth groups as advocates could be effective because the impact is twofold. Current waste would be reduced while future generations would be educated on how to cut emissions. There is a need to develop more east-west mass transit, and the above are just examples of what could be considered or is needed. Again, I thank you for this opportunity and for all you do. Best wishes to all the candidates and to our beloved San Mateo. End statement from Rod Linares.
Thank you, candidates, for all of your statements. Now, the moment you have all been waiting for, the first question. So ambitious goals such as completing the bicycle master plan or implementing the city's decarbonization goals would require significant increases in staff bandwidth allocated towards meeting those goals and delivering those projects. City staff have remarked that staff bandwidth and funding are primary factors that limit the city's ability to improve safety on San Mateo streets through traffic calming and bike ped projects. Do you support increasing the level of priority for these transportation and climate goals and directing staff to dedicate more of their existing time and resources to these efforts? Further, do you support the addition of a full-time position to focus on bicycle pedestrian projects and parking management to encourage the transition? Let's start first with Lisa Nash.
All right, thank you. Number one, and please let me know if I don't get the whole question because it was a long one. Yes, I think that is a reality today, that we have a bandwidth shortage because of staff. In addition to looking at how to reallocate duties within city staff, I would also welcome the opportunity for public-private partnerships. We are in the middle of Silicon Valley. We have the opportunity to invite resources in who would have so much to give us and who would probably benefit in return. So I would look at that, number one. I'd look at number two, how do we increase the use of technology? Because I think we can get a lot of efficiencies in terms of making existing staff go further. I would not want to micromanage, do we have 3 staff or do we have 2 staff? But I would absolutely want to put the resources where they needed to be. In terms of having a dedicated staff, though, to manage the transition with bicycle and pedestrian and parking management, I think that's a very important thing. If you don't have someone whose entire responsibility is on what you're trying to achieve, it takes so much longer. So I think that would be a very good thing to do.
Thank you, Lisa. I know I gave you 1 second to collect your thoughts there.
Okay.
How about from Rob?
Sure. Can you actually re-synopsize the questions just so I can kind of make sure I got them all?
Yes. So the questions are, do you support increasing the level of priority for these transportation and climate goals and directing staff to dedicate more of their existing time and resources to these efforts? Further, do you support the addition of a full-time position to focus on bicycle pedestrian projects and parking management to encourage the transition? And maybe, I don't know who's the admin, but we can put these questions because they're kind of long in the chat if that's possible.
That would actually help, yeah. Okay, so yes, I would support a person with the full-time function. It may be that bicycle and pedestrian is one avenue and parking management is another. It may also be that parking management, is currently outsourced to some degree to, I think it's Luz, the people who do our parking enforcement. So it might be that we can get some private contributions from them as well to see if we could add to that. As far as safety for me is a huge priority. My teenage daughters cross the El Camino Real every day and the train tracks every day. And so I'd really like to see additional safety measures put in place, particularly for crossing those 2 major medians. And then as far as supporting a full-time person, yes, I addressed that. And yeah, I think I've covered everything. I mean, we could definitely utilize more technology. We could talk to other cities and use best practices. So there are other ways that we can improve by using the resources that we have as well. So yes, that's my answer. Yes and yes.
Thank you, Rob. Let's go now to Sarah.
Yes, thank you for the question. I want to be very clear. In the neighborhoods in District 3, this is incredibly important. I support increasing the level of priority for these transit and climate goals. Unfortunately, just very recently, there was an incident of a child being clipped by a vehicle in Bay Meadows while scooting across the street. There are so many intersections, not just major intersections, but intersections in many of our neighborhoods that really need to be examined and likely be redesigned with both safety in mind and emergency vehicle access in mind, because it's those two things that are often seen in tension with each other that need to be solved together. I'm fortunate to have the support of Local 2400, our firefighters here in San Mateo, and I'll work with them along with residents to make sure that we have safe streets. I think having a professional who's really leading the way is also a helpful way to make sure that we're designing our way into safer streets. It's extremely important. The high quality of life in San Mateo that we all enjoy means being able to live in a neighborhood and being able to know your children can walk to school and not have to worry about their safety, that you can walk across the street to go visit a neighbor or to go run an errand and not worry about your safety. So much of climate action in small ways is just changing from the car to your bicycle or to walking. And if you don't feel safe doing it, it's not going to happen. And so we really need to dedicate ourselves as a city to making sure we can have these easier access points and have the safety and the confidence to do it.
Thanks, Sarah. Sergio, your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. So, I'm going to sort of answer the question in reverse. I would fully support adding another full-time staff member to prioritize first and last mile transit, planning in real protected bike lanes with an actual divider, not just a line. In our district, especially, as Sarah had mentioned, this is a critical topic because we have some pretty large, they're not really artery roads, but I consider them like, Delaware Street, things like that, that's within our district. And that street, I can really see having some better, it already has bike lanes, but better bike lanes. As been mentioned before, people have been hurt or almost hurt, unfortunately, by drivers, and we really need to take care of that. I also think that we need to leverage our relationships with the state. We have pretty progressive pedestrian signals in terms of the signal will go for the pedestrian first before the cars are allowed to go. If we can get that enabled on El Camino Real, which the city doesn't actually control, it's actually CalTrain's, we can further improve pedestrian safety there. As well as, I'm just making sure I answer everything here. I don't think we should reprioritize existing staff. We have some huge projects, including the sewer. So I think we need to add staff and funding to do this. We should prioritize the city's efforts, but we should add additional staff instead of, sort of forcing our staff members to have, multiple hats, which they already have. So we should definitely add more people as necessary. Thanks.
Thank you, Sergio. And then lastly, Adam.
Thank you. Yes. Firstly, I would support prioritizing sustainability and infrastructure a bit more than we have in the past. I think it will become more and more important as the years go on. And so I would like to see funding reflect that. You'll see that I've been advocating for such things for years as a resident who gives a hoot and attends city council blue sky priority sessions. That's one thing you can count on if I become a city council member, is bringing some of these priorities to the blue sky sessions and making sure they become part of our strategic plan for years to come. That's kind of how we've gotten to a good place in the last couple of years. We've gone from an unfunded bicycle master plan update to folks that are in this call right now advocating for more, and council members responded by bringing priorities to the blue sky sessions, ensuring that we have now a part-time safe routes to schools coordinator position. I would like to see that go perhaps to full-time. I think Sue Ellen Atkinson might wonder if she's chopped liver on the question of whether we need a full-time person doing parking management and bicycle ped infrastructure. That's kind of what she does. So I do think she could probably use some help. I also think the sustainability department is going to need more help for a decarbonization priority, and I would support funding both of those. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for those answers. I am excited to ask the first specifically climate-related question of the evening. We learned recently that the City of San Mateo is not on track to meet the greenhouse gas reduction targets in the City Council-approved Climate Action Plan. Among other impacts, which there are many, such failure will likely contribute to all of San Mateo east of the CalTrain rail line being subjected to flooding due to sea level rise. What specific policies and programs would you propose if elected to the City Council to meet the Climate Action Plan's climate target? And we're going to start with Rob for this one.
Okay. I would suggest that we've already talked about this, but with moving off of natural gas, I would suggest that effective immediately or as quickly as possible, we bring all new buildings to being off of natural gas. I would also suggest that we continue to expand our infrastructure for mass transit. We have a huge lack of ability for people to, who especially work in the East Bay, to get easily to the East Bay and back. So that obviously adds to people getting in their cars. I think we're going to have to do a lot more building of infrastructure in order to get to where we're supposed to be going with moving all vehicles to electric in the next dozen years or so. In order to do that, we're going to have to come up with grid improvements for the electrical grid, which is going to definitely tax PG&E, and I'm not sure they're up for it. But we need to make sure that we're moving towards it, and we're finding a way that's fair and equitable so that people can actually charge their vehicles when they've migrated to an electric vehicle. Those are all primary suggestions. Additionally, the expansion of bike lanes, bike routes, making the city more bike friendly, improving upon the way that things are connected are all very important. I'm trying to think what else. I've got so many notes. I think water conservation is another big thing. Here we are talking about sea level rise, but on the flip side, we also are in historic drought times. So moving your neighbors to getting away from green lawns and into native plants is a big deal. I think looking at ways to reuse gray water would also be very helpful, so that we're able to use and recycle water. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Sarah Fields, you're next.
Great, and thank you for the question. Tackling climate change is really a regional effort, and San Mateo needs to do its part. Several years ago, the state legislature created the system that created our regional government of ABAG, and we need to work together through those regional bodies to achieve these goals. And that means we really do need to do our own part. I think that the city council's role in this is a couple of parts. One is really education. We hear a lot right now of pushback around the REACH codes, and something that I think the city council and the city, and including the staff, really need to work on is helping to educate folks about how to transition from gas to electric in existing buildings. We know that in new construction, it's fairly easy to shift into full electrification. And just as a couple of examples, there are some rebate programs from PCE, from Peninsula Clean Energy, as well as from RABEN, which is the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, including funds towards heat pump water heater, high efficiency heat pump for air conditioning and cooling, funds for an induction stove, and other programs like that. And I think there's a real a need for more education and more communication out to our constituents, especially individual homeowners who are getting a lot of misinformation about what the expectations are for them, and to really know that the city is the partner in this, not trying to motivate or trying to punish people, but really trying to make sure we have a city for everyone to live in safely and efficiently.
Thank you, Sarah. Next is Sergio.
Yeah, thanks so much for this question. the answer to this question always involves getting people out of their cars and onto their feet or into transit. We've already talked about plenty of stuff we can do for that, right? Adding protected bike lanes, all that stuff. For climate, ensuring responsible and sustainable generation of energy is always a good thing. We talk about rebate programs for certain, electrification efforts. I don't think they're enough right now. Sure, they'll pay for appliances, but are they going to pay for me to add new wires into my walls, right? Also, these programs are really hard to use, right? I bought an electric car recently, and I still don't know if I'm qualified for the Peninsula Clean Energy program. It's not particularly easy, and the income limits are very strange. So from there, I think making everything more accessible to the people, especially when you talk about reaching into their homes and changing things, is a critical juncture. Ensuring that city employees are driving around in more efficient vehicles, right? The fleet is aging. We need to do something about that. That's always a good place to start, but also incentivizing businesses and individuals to also drive around in efficient vehicles, hopefully electric. We can all do big things or little things to make a big difference, right? Whether it's use transit, switch out our appliances, or buy an electric car. There's lots of stuff we need to do, and we need to do it right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Adam.
Yes, thank you. I think the main way we're going to advance and make sure that we meet our climate action plan goals is to put our pedal to the metal on some of the items that we have in our climate action plan. These are big policies that we know are going to take time, effort, and resources to complete. The first climate action plan from 2015 to 2020 was mainly about switching to renewable energy through Peninsula Clean Energy. And now we need to take the next step of leveraging that now cleaner energy to further reduce our emissions. It's about collaborating on a general plan that allows for sustainable land use, circulation, and housing elements that will get people out of their cars and reduce emissions while still allowing more people to live where they work and thrive here in San Mateo. It's about advancing and accelerating climate action with a decarbonization plan that started as a city council priority this year from Mayor Rick Bonilla. And we can take next steps toward that. We need to sort of gird it and put a foundation underneath it. I'm optimistic given the last city council meeting on this. My mission would be to take it a step farther. We need resources, community involvement, and logistics to reach decarbonization goals, some of which Sarah described. Accelerate and ensure completion of priorities in a bicycle master plan by finding reliable internal funding to complement grants. To our previous question, it's about things like Measure CC, which will help increase funding to our general fund, and smooth streets and CIP. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Last is Lisa Diaz Nash.
Thank you for the question. Really, everything we do is going to impact what happens with climate change. If I start geographically over on the Bay, San Mateo County is the most threatened county in terms of sea level rise. And we need to take a leadership role in One Shoreline, which is our regional effort. As Sarah talked about, this is a regional challenge, so that we can work together to deal with climate change and sea level rise. We need to implement nature-based adaptation programs. If we just let Mother Nature start to grow back the marshes, we can start to deal with some things that are happening. We need to complete the San Mateo wastewater treatment plant and other aspects of our clean water program that promote equity and resilience in communities in San Mateo that are really much more vulnerable environmentally. We need to advocate and implement an early warning flood system and community education, because we are going to have to deal with reality before we get to tomorrow. And then I think sustainable San Mateo County is a huge asset that we have. Their Ideas Bank has programs of other cities and counties in the Bay Area that have done programs that work, and we should take full advantage of it. Coming into the city, Electrification is a goal we all have to be behind, but we have to have a detailed plan behind it so that we can get there. And I think it has to focus on convenience. As someone else mentioned, consumers and businesses are overwhelmed. If we had a concierge service like they do in Sacramento, or they're starting to in Palo Alto, that let everybody come and say, what do I need? How do I need it? Where are the incentives? How do I make it simple? That would be a huge way of getting momentum growing.
Thank you.
Lisa.
Thanks. So the next question is, according to San Mateo's Climate Action Plan, on-road transportation emissions account for between 40 and 50% of all emissions in the city, representing the largest chunk of greenhouse gas emissions. The principle of induced demand states that increasing vehicle capacity, like adding a car lane, in fact, just invites more vehicle trips and does not improve congestion in the long term, leading to increased greenhouse gas emissions. What is your position on induced demand, and what transportation and land use strategies, whether related to transportation decarbonization or mode shift, would you pursue to reduce emission share from transportation? Sarah, can you kick off this question?
Yeah, so, I mentioned in my opening statement that I'm trained as an urban and regional planner. And this was something that was really drilled into me in planning school, that, adding a car lane, even though I know, I'll say one of my opponents has suggested an additional lane on 92. It's not a policy solution to getting traffic moving. We need to work with large employers in the region. A hybrid work system has actually been very good in terms of the reduction of carbon in the area. But also we need to make it more attractive to commute to work in ways beyond your car. And the reality is, whether if you're an electric vehicle or in a gas-powered vehicle or a hybrid vehicle, a car on the road is still a car on the road. And so we need to move more towards CalTrain and some of the Samtrans buses. That being said, the way to make that more attractive is to develop housing and workplaces along the CalTrain corridor. Now, for a long time, we've been very good at developing workplaces along the CalTrain corridor, but the last time I checked, people don't go from job to job, or at least hopefully they don't. Hopefully they only have one, because that should be enough. And so it's important to be able to live close to the CalTrain and then work close to the CalTrain. And if you don't, to also have a bike path that gets you from either your home to CalTrain or from work to CalTrain. Hopefully one of them is in close proximity to a CalTrain stop. With electrification, that's going to help a lot, because CalTrain will be quieter, a little bit faster, and this is the most important, more frequent. We're so lucky in District 3 to have 2 CalTrain stops, and that will be a key to making this the reality. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Sergio, you're next.
Definitely. Yeah. In order to, I'm just making sure I have everything covered here. Okay. So getting cars off the road is optimal, right? As Sarah had mentioned, CalMod is a big part of that, making the CalTrain more attractive to people to get on. There's going to be technology improvements coming along as well. Clipper 2.0 should make it so people won't need a Clipper card, and that will hopefully make ridership easier. You don't have to rush for a machine or use the app. But I think we should also be using our highways more efficiently. As Robin mentioned earlier, why is there no transit option across the bridge? I think there should be a bus lane at least, or something to make it so people going east to west or west to east or whatever it looks like have a transit option. You should not need a car or an Uber to get across the bridge. All of these things, we don't necessarily have to push for people to, add lanes to the highway. We should not be adding lanes. I don't think we should be prioritizing the lanes for transit, making transit a lot more attractive so people take it every day when possible. Another way to reduce climate change is to enable people to work from home when it is possible, right? The way to decrease your climate use to zero is to not go anywhere, right? Of course, I'm not asking every single day, but some of the days it is definitely a way to decrease your impact. So again, main points: optimizing our existing transit infrastructure, reducing greenhouse gas when possible with CalMod. All of this stuff is going to add to a decreased overall carbon emission. Thank you.
Thanks, Sergio. Adam, you're next.
Thank you. I believe that induced demand is something we should definitely be keeping in mind. Let's leverage it for multimodal transportation, right? We could turn this into a positive. And indeed, that's somewhat of what the idea behind our bicycle master plan. People aren't going to ride if there's not a network, and you need to be increasing modes for people. And if you can increase where you can bike, the demand will come. It'll come from families who may find that protected bike lanes in a network allow them to consider, taking their children to school, or to actually, go get groceries and whatnot. So I think my main thought on induced demand is let's apply it. As part of our Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission, we're going to get an opportunity to review a complete streets plan that has been funded and staff is going to be working on as part of our overall general plan update. I'm really looking forward to this because I think that's where we're going to be able to see examples of inducing demand for bike and ped, shuttle transportation, buses, and other mass transportation. Another thought on CalTrain, people are mentioning, I really appreciate the new schedule that we have that started in September. It has express trains from Hillsdale to South San Francisco, where I'm working a number of days a week. And it's actually faster now for me to take a CalTrain to work than it is to drive a car. That's what we need to be doing. Let's induce that demand. And I think we'll see a lot of positive benefits. And let's resist the urge to induce demand for cars and the old mode of transportation, even if it looks like it's going to hurt. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Lisa, you're next.
Thank you very much. I think there is a principle we've all been talking about, that any kind of transit to get people out of cars has to be convenient, affordable, and safe. And we need to think about that in everything we're doing, because once that happens, then people will make the move naturally by themselves. We also have an opportunity to develop denser, multifamily, transit-oriented housing in downtown San Mateo and along the corridor. And that will create sufficient consumer demand to increase our public transit, as well as making our downtowns more lively and economically viable. And we've talked about expanding east-west transit. It's great to have transit to commute. We have to have public transit and multimodal transit in order to live. And that includes last mile vehicles, little shuttles, places where you can get to soccer practice, or you can visit a friend, or you can go to the doctor. That's what makes people think of transit as part of their everyday lives. We also have huge opportunities to take advantage of all of the federal and state funding that's available now, from new programs to promote public transit. And I think we should take full advantage of that. As was said, we need to invest in complete street structure for pedestrians, bicycles, and other wheeled options, but we need to do it with the right kind of community discussion so that it is something the community supports and makes successful. Now, we also have to look at all forms of shared mobility, whether it's e-bikes or scooters, to help everyone from our young to our old. Thank you.
Rob, you're next.
Sure. Well, thank you again for the question. So a big part of the challenge with San Mateo in particular, and I know this from living here forever, is that so many of our people who are retail workers, so many of our public works people, our police and our fire, they live in the East Bay. And for them to get to work in a way other than a car is very inconvenient. And if we don't make it convenient, then people won't do it. So, there are things that can help. Obviously, people mentioned working from home, also working flex hours, meaning not working a traditional 9 to 5 shift, but working something that's either earlier or later so that they're off peak. But really, a big part of the problem comes down to the San Mateo Bridge. The San Mateo Bridge the only way to get across the San Mateo Bridge is by car. What we need to do is bring back the AC transit that crosses, from Hayward Park BART station to the San Mateo Hayward Park CalTrain station. They're both named Hayward, so that should be a hint that they should be connected. And then being able to go east to west even further up into Laurelwood and and up near CSM are very important. Currently, I have a cousin who goes to college at CSM, and with the reduced Samtrans routes, it takes more than 47 minutes during peak hours to wait to catch a bus to go 1.5 miles up the road. So, maybe these things are not traditional buses. Maybe we need to be looking at last mile transit and have small on-demand vehicles like vans that can take multiple passengers. And then we just need to really focus on making sure that all of this is an affordable and seamless transit network. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. The next climate question. With the Inflation Reduction Act providing funding for every San Mateo resident to replace gas water heaters and furnaces with electric models, the current city council has approved a work plan for the city to develop a REACH code for existing buildings, including a provision that after January 1st, 2025, no building permits will be issued for replacing gas water heaters and gas furnaces unless the replacement is electric. Do you agree with that work plan? If no, why not? If yes, how should the electric replacement policy be implemented? Or what is your alternative proposal for reducing greenhouse gas emissions from water heaters and furnaces? And the first for this is Sergio.
Yeah, this is such a great question. It's a very interesting challenge. This whole idea of REACH codes. In a perfect world, I'd fully support getting rid of gas altogether. Get rid of the pipes in the ground. No more pollution in the ground. Right now, I do support for new buildings, and I would support for existing buildings, but we need to consider the engineering challenges here, right? Both on the supply, the transmission, and the generation sides, as well as within your home, right? The Inflation Reduction Act and state funding might provide funding, even if they pay for the full water heater, right? A nice new. I just installed a heat pump water heater for my parents, and it was nearly $3,000, unfortunately. And even if the system did pay for that, there's still concerns of the electrical infrastructure within everyone's home, right? I have a 100 amp panel, and it is filled up, right? I do not have any additional breakers for an electric range or an electric dryer or even electric heat pump. Actually, no, HVAC would not need an additional one, but an electric water heater, right? I already have an electric car, and I use my last 2 breakers for that. But I think we really need to consider, how are we going to get these into people's homes, right? We can pay for all the appliances we want, but where the really expensive stuff is the labor and the additional cords you have to run and all that stuff that really needs to be sorted out. So I fully support it, but we really need to figure out how we're going to actually help the average citizen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Adam, you're next.
Thank you. I would say that I support this work plan. I think it's a great step forward. I think it really gives us that next step from our decarbonization priority that the City Council passed this year. And I want us to shoot for it. I do think Sergio and others will bring up challenges. And so I think we just need to be making sure that we are prioritizing this. I think going back to the first question, it's about putting resources where our vision is, because this is going to be a huge undertaking. And we're going to need all the help we can get. I think some other cities have already begun some of this work. Menlo Park, San Jose come to mind. Menlo Park in particular has reached a deal with Block Power to begin partnership that and they got money from the state to really make headway on making this real for families in their city, in their community, and starting critically with folks with lower incomes. It's about doing all that we can in a way that doesn't burden our residents, in a way that's cost effective and cost neutral, And so that's going to require finding more resources and making the most out of what the Inflation Reduction Act and other California rebates are bringing to us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Lisa, you're next.
Yeah, I consistently have said we need to go for the biggest goal we possibly can, but only when we have a detailed plan that shows how we're going to get there so that we wind up being successful and not falling flat on our face. And some of that is consumer oriented, some of it is supply chain oriented. You go all the way back up, we've got the grid. We all know this past summer, we almost went on brownouts just because it was hot. So we need to take a look at that and start to invest in microgrids, starting to have more energy closer to the source of where the need is. So that's an investment in our future. We also need to invest in our people resources. This is a huge opportunity for our community colleges, for our union apprenticeship programs, who can really train out the people we need to make that transition as quickly as we possibly can and create great, good paying jobs and keep those jobs here in the community. It also is about cost, and a lot of people have talked about incentives. We need to have, that's where I'd have somebody dedicated, is finding all the opportunities to get money and pilot opportunities for San Mateo. We should be the poster child of doing all of this. And I think that would be an exciting thing. We're in the middle of Silicon Valley, as I've said before. Let's invite in public-private partnerships so that we really can take advantage of all the ingenuity that's around us. And then coming back to consumers, consumer education, and convenience. People want to do the right thing, but they don't want to be burdened by prohibitive costs. But if you give them a way forward, people will, I'm sure, jump for it.
Thanks, Lisa. Rob, I have you next.
Well, I support the concept of immediately moving to this being the case for all new buildings. Like most of you have said, I have concerns. I do not believe that the PG&E grid will be able to handle this this improvement. I mean, basically, we're looking at 2 to 3 times the electrical load for our homes, and we're looking at this in a 3 to 4 year rollout. That's just not sustainable. And it's not that I don't want it to be. I don't think anyone on this call, I at least hope, this has the idea of, no, we want gas forever. I mean, the idea is we want to do this, but we want to make sure that this rollout is done in such a way that people aren't burnt out by it, people aren't unfairly, cost affected by it, and that it's not something that people are going to work around. That's the other scare for me is you tell them you won't be able to get a permit to get a water heater, and people are going to go, well, I'm going to go get a water heater without a permit. So we have to make sure that we make all this, but we have to make sure we have a plan in place so that it's actually something that can happen. I think we have to look for ways to find subsidies and rebate programs, particularly for, really for everyone, but people who are low income and people who are pensioners are not going to be able to do a home upgrade of $70,000 to $90,000 for their house to upgrade their service for 2 or 3 times the power pole and actually start replacing appliances. So all those things are important. And then, as was mentioned, the grid has been extremely taxed. Just as recently as 3 weeks ago, they were asking us to, conserve power in the afternoon, turn everything off, and not charge our cars. I don't know what that looks like in 12 years when we all have electric cars. So support for new buildings and hope that we can work towards a plan to make it more reality.
Thank you, Rob. And last, we have Sarah.
Yeah, I just want to say this is the only sustainable plan. I don't know why my opponent just said it wasn't sustainable. I think that's an absurd thing to have said. Look, 2 years from now, which is essentially January of 2025, feels incredibly soon, but I want to be clear that the lifetime of a water heater is about 8 to 12 years. So it does mean that we would need to make that transition, but it would be a transition over time. It wouldn't be all of a sudden it's January 1st and everyone is required to change their water heater. It means that's when we would start to make that transition from gas to electric. I think the only way to do it is to decide on a date and say, this is when we're moving on. And frankly, this is an incredible opportunity. Federal government funding comes when it comes. And we, as a city council, you know, I'm sorry to say this, but we don't have a lot of pull on the federal government. I'm happy to say Anna Eshoo is supporting my campaign, but you know, it only goes so far. So it's a real opportunity, and we have to take advantage of the opportunities when we can, because I'm sorry to sound dire, but I think to this group, I can. You know, we just talked about not meeting our climate action goals. And if we kick the can down the road longer in terms of the REACH codes, which by the way, we already have REACH codes for new buildings, that's done. This is talking about existing buildings, and we have to do it, because if we don't, we can talk about all the nice things we have in San Mateo, but if the next generation can't live here, it was all for nothing.
Thank you, Sarah. This is the next transportation question. So San Mateo recently conducted a statistically significant survey that found that 65% of residents support adding bike lanes and widening sidewalks in San Mateo, even when these efforts would require removing a vehicle lane or parking spaces. Do you support prioritizing safety improvements over parking and vehicle capacity when the two uses are in conflict? Adam, let's start with you.
Well, that's a big question. I think each case is specific. And so while in general, I agree that I certainly want and would agree with those who supported in this survey more bicycle lanes and wider sidewalks especially, I am amazed at how narrow these sidewalks feel. You can't really even have one person going one way and one the other ever. So I would love to see transitioning into that. I think we're just going to need to be very careful about where these changes are happening and what exactly the impact to the existing infrastructure is going to be. We, you know, as part of the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission, we got to review the North Central Bike Lanes project, which was our city's really first, I think, foray into this on a significant level, talking about, you know, over 100 parking spaces, for example, you know, is new territory for us. And that was a tough project. It was a neighborhood that already feels pinched on parking. And, you know, to me, I think it's going to require a community-driven process. I am data-driven, I'm science-driven, and we know that we need to get people out of their cars and reduce emissions. We talked about induced demand earlier. I think that plays a role in what we're talking about. I just think we need to take a measured approach, a little similar to what Sarah was mentioning about REACH codes and you know, finding subsidies. We need to be having community conversations about why this could still be a good thing for our community in the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Lisa, your thoughts?
I guess I'm going to be a broken record here and say that the community is behind big goals, but you have to involve the community in making things happen. And I think it was very unfortunate that the North Central pilot happened the way it did, because the community in North Central felt as if the project was happening to them and not with them. And it didn't have to be that way. I think what has to happen, and Adam made some comment this way, is that we need to look at our plan and not just say, where do we want to put the bike lanes and how do we want to build the wider sidewalks, but how do we involve the community up front, understand what their needs are. You know, in North Central now, there are people who are parking their cars on their front lawns because there's no place else to go. It didn't have to be that way. And part of it was optics because the community wasn't involved. Closer to where I am in District 1, there was a bike lane put in near our Bay Tree Park. And once again, there was a lot of backlash, not because the bike lane came in, but because the community hadn't been involved. So I think there's a lot we can do in terms of getting the community involved and saying, how do we do this? We need to do this. What do you need in order to make it happen? So I don't think it has to be always an either or, but there are other things that can happen. We can look at one-way streets that can free up parking spaces and the need for parking. We can look at the shuttles, the last mile shuttles. There are a lot of things we can do. It's not just a, do we do it this way or do we do it that way? We want to get there, but we want to get there together.
Thanks, Lisa. Rob, you're next.
Sure. Well, I mean, some of the challenges are that as we've been successfully trying to add ADUs and remove garages for more space, we're also losing, off-street parking. So I myself live on a very busy street. Delaware Street runs right through the middle of San Mateo. We're lucky that we have a bus route that runs down our street. We've got great bus lanes, and we actually have pretty good width as far as our sidewalks. They could be better, but they're pretty good. But not many of our neighborhoods can say the same thing. And so, I think I would definitely want to make that a priority, but I also want to make sure that we're involving the neighborhoods that we're affecting in the conversation. And as we build, we're hoping that in time people will not have more than one car per house, but that is just not the reality of the world that we live in now. Most homes have 2 vehicles, some have 3. And when you get into only having one off-street parking space, it really exacerbates the situation. So, I would definitely support the bike lanes, widening of sidewalks, more bike lanes. I just want to make sure that we include the community in any future projects, and that we figure out ways to help relieve the pressure when it comes. So those are my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Sarah.
Yeah, I really just want to say, first of all, I really applaud the staff of the City of San Mateo for this effort. For so long, we've had community outreach efforts that have been really thoughtfully done, but not statistically significant. And this really marks an important shift in the way we survey residents. And I really want to highlight that because, there's been efforts, community meetings at different times, Zoom, in person, English and Spanish, but really this is different. And it's important to really note that we can say this is a statistically significant sample. And it really is illuminating to us as candidates, to staff, and to other policymakers. And I really applaud this effort. San Mateo really, it's such a great place to live, and we could use just a little bit more in terms of bike lanes and sidewalks. They could be a little bit prettier, and they could be more useful. So whatever we can do that helps to get people to want to walk more and ride their bike more, I think is really important. And I want to say specifically that Move San Mateo, which is our local Silicon Valley Bike Coalition chapter, has done something really special with these community group bike rides. And the community group bike rides have, I'll say for me personally, have helped me to feel more comfortable and more safe riding a bike around San Mateo. And it's those kinds of efforts that seem kind of small at first, but really start to build and grow and help people to feel a little bit safer. The other thing I want to say is, as a single woman, San Mateo is too dark. If I walk here in the evening, it's not comfortable. And that's something else that we need to improve in terms of prioritizing safety in San Mateo. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. And then lastly, Sergio.
Yeah, we really do need to help people get out of their cars and get onto their feet or onto transit. Sidewalks need to be improved as much as, we definitely want them to look nice. We also have a legal obligation under the ADA to make the sidewalks functional for everyone. When we talk about removing parking, that's always a hot topic, right? It might be a little bit of a hot take to say removing on-street parking is a good thing, right? We need to add protected bike lanes. People say there's not enough demand for bike lanes, but if you make the bike lanes actually protected with bollards or something that a car can't just drive over, people will take the bike lanes more often, right? When we think about the household and what a household looks like, a household of 3 or 4 is the reason why they need 2 or 3 cars, right? it's really tough, right? And a lot of people, if you look in their garage, they store a whole lot of stuff in their car, but not, or in their garage, but it's not a car. We can definitely explore some options to help people put their cars in the garage or on their property where it belongs, and help us add bike lanes that are protected, so people can be encouraged to get rid of that car, and to take transit as much as they can. We should not take away people's cars, or make it hard for them to get cars or anything like that, but we should really be making it actually encouraging to get on transit, get on their feet, and get out of their car. And to add, to fully agree with Sarah's point, we need to add more lighting to the roads to make it more comfortable for people to walk and ride at night. Thank you.
Thank you all for answering that question. We want to make sure that there's time for audience questions. So this will be our last pre-scripted question before we move into audience questions. So last climate related question from me is, please list one or two specific climate action and or environmental justice related activities that you have been actively involved with in the last 5 years. Again, one or two specific climate actions that you've been involved with or environmental justice related actions over the last five years. And we're going to start with Lisa.
Sure. Well, for 8 years, I was the head of a global water and sanitation nonprofit, and we worked around the world to help communities bring sustainable, clean water to them. Because once you bring clean, sustainable water, everything goes from there. And it's the basis of environmental justice. Since I've left that organization, I've stayed very involved with several of the water groups down in the Central Valley, because we in California have huge inadequacies and environmental injustice when it comes to giving everyone access to sustainable, clean water. And we now have, a few years ago, the governor declared water was a human right in California. I mean, it's crazy that it had to take till that. But we are now working, and I'm working with these groups in the Central Valley to bring that water to the communities, primarily to the farm workers who are there tilling the fields and bringing the produce that all of us take for granted, but they don't have clean water to call on their own, even in their own homes. Also, the water table in the Central Valley is dangerously unstable, which then further exacerbates the problem. So that's where I have chosen to focus my environmental justice efforts. And it is just such a fundamental need that has run-on effects for everyone.
Thank you, Lisa. Next, I have Rob.
I'd like to do more. I myself, have tried very hard to reduce the amount of times we actually get in a vehicle, let alone in a vehicle alone. I've moved my house from running on gas vehicles to an electric and a hybrid vehicle, and we're hoping to continue to move towards less usage of the vehicle at all. Participate with my daughters 3 to 4 times a year in coastal cleanup, and we, really get out there and teach our daughters the importance of helping, clean and improve the environment. It really gives an open awareness, or builds awareness for our daughters as to how important it is that we all do something. And it also makes them more conscientious when they go home of not taking overly long showers and not leaving lights on in the house, and just trying to teach the next generation that what things we can do to be better. And then on my own, try to continue to move our own household to more electric and less gas. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Next is Sarah.
Yeah, thank you for the question. San Mateo is a place, and it's a challenging history, but there were many homes built in the last century that had racial covenants built into their deeds. And those racial covenants still exist in those deeds. Obviously, they're not enforceable because of the fair housing law, but the way we think about how we build, I think, has to stem from that history. There's an interesting example in Minnesota of different municipalities. It's called Just Deeds, of erasing those problematic deeds. And I'll tell you, as a Jewish person, I find that actually very reassuring, because many of these deeds also say only Protestants can buy homes, also men. No offense to Protestants or men, but I'd like to think that anyone who has the funds could buy a home. And the next layer of that is the environmental justice piece, that there's a history of redlining in the city of San Mateo. Of course, we've moved past it, but if you look at who lives where, there's still pieces of that left in our city. And it's an unfortunate history, and it's a history that I think we do need to confront a little bit closer. And so thinking about where people live and what they're in proximity to, whether it's emissions or a land use that may cause harm to children or to adults living in close proximity, I think is really important. And so I've advocated for affordable housing across San Mateo in the last several years. And that housing is often denser, which means it's more efficient. And that is the kind of housing I will continue to advocate for on the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next is Sergio.
Yeah, so this is such an important topic for me. I'm not on any boards of any, huge nonprofits or anything like that, but I do own a business, and I have volunteered with several nonprofits to help our next generation. I mentioned the business ownership because I own a mid-sized technology company, and we've taken a huge stance towards environmentalism, from having a 100% electric fleet to, without getting too technical, shifting compute workloads to a more efficient serverless architecture that results in less than half of the environmental impact. I think those actions, as well as my individual actions, are really important to me, and I'm very proud of them. Individually, I try to get not use my car as much as I can. I have an electric scooter. I like to walk around. I do have as I said, a fully electric car. Personally, I have a fully electric car, and I, make other measures to reduce my personal climate usage, including working from home. For environmental justice, I do think, to reiterate what others said, we definitely need to make it easier for people to own homes, even though a lot of those things are not enforceable. We do see that we sort of switch from one bad thing to another bad thing, right? Homes are not affordable. We need to make them, home ownership should be accessible to everyone, not just people with $400,000 in their pocket, right? We really need to make a shift, and I think that I would be very proud to make those changes on the council.
Thank you so much. And lastly, Adam Loraine.
Thank you. Well, I think it started by becoming, well, I suppose, the last 5 years. I'll say I was a volunteer for Peninsula Clean Energy before the cities had ratified it. I was among those who advocated with our local Sierra Club team to ask the city council to become a part of Peninsula Clean Energy. And then I got to volunteer with the County Office of Sustainability to, once it had passed, to reach out to local businesses in our city and educate them about changes that were coming and how they could maximize them. I've similarly volunteered as part of this upcoming composting ordinance that is going to require food distributors to use compostable packaging. It's huge. It's going to reduce a lot of plastic waste in our city. I'm very excited about it. I got to be an ambassador of that program from the county. I've been a member of Citizens Climate Lobby that is lobbying Congress for a carbon fee and dividend bill that would put a price on carbon nationally, but one in a revenue neutral way that distributes the money back to Americans and just uses our economic drivers to push us out of fossil fuels. I got to be part of a team that urged our Congresswoman Jackie Spear to co-sponsor the bill, and she did accept to do that. I'm an original co-lead of Move San Mateo and a member of Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. I've for years as a sustainability commissioner, sustainability and infrastructure commissioner, part of our general plan subcommittee, and as a resident who gives a hoot, supported increasing access to transportation, which is huge for environmental justice, seamless transit, affordable and available housing. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. We're doing a quick behind the scenes time check, so 1 second. Clarissa, I think you're good to take the next one.
Sure. Okay, so before our next question, I wanted to ask the audience to please take a moment to type any questions that you might have to Michelle Hudson in the chat. And that'll give you time to log your questions before we choose which one to tackle. Okay, so this is the last transportation question I have. Protected bike lanes have been shown to improve roadway safety for all users, including motorists, while increasing bicycle ridership. However, the San Mateo City Council recently voted to remove protected bike lanes from the bicycle master plan between 3rd and 5th Avenues on B Street. Some council members argued that not every street needs a protected bike lane and that other streets would be more appropriate for protected bike lanes. Do you support this decision? Do you think protected bike lanes increase bicycle mode share and improve bicycle safety? We'll start first with Rob.
I'm a big proponent of separated and protected bike lanes. One of my early experiences right after college was I got to live in the Netherlands for 2 years. And the Netherlands have an incredibly well-developed ability to get through by bicycle, and so many more people. In fact, 2 years of living there, I never had to drive a car. I drove a bike even in the snow. And a big part of that is having dedicated bike lanes. They call them bike freeways, actually, that run parallel to, for example, in our case, something that would run parallel or to 92, something that would run parallel to El Camino Real, maybe Delaware Street or the 101 corridor. All those things would be a huge boon for San Mateo. And San Mateo, for my entire adult life, has talked about adding protected bike lanes along the CalTrain corridor. I think as we're moving towards electrification, now is a great time to strike and actually push for that. A lot of money is going to have to be sunk in, and it's the right time to do it now. Plan it in, as many of you guys have suggested. So yeah, big proponent of that. I don't know that I would speak to 3rd or 5th without saying that maybe the answer is yes with 3rd and 5th, but maybe what we really should look at, and I've suggested, and many of you have said similar things, is moving downtown to having more one-way streets and in each direction, and that would free up both ability to have more space for outdoor eating and dedicated and protected bike lanes. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Sarah, you're next.
Yeah. Look, we should have more dedicated bike lanes. It helps with safety. It helps with people who might be on the fence about riding their bike to then be more motivated to ride their bike. B Street, however, is the downtown promenade. And so it makes sense that we would make it for pedestrians. If I'm reading this correctly, so you're saying on B Street between 3rd and 5th Avenue, and it should be reserved for parklets and people, and I think probably widening the sidewalk. So I think if I'm reading the question correctly, I agree with what the council did. However, we need to create alternative bike routes because too much of bicycling across the peninsula right now means stopping and starting. So you have sections of bike lane, and then you have dangerous parts of riding your bike, and then safer sections. And so that full connectivity is really important. And so that means working with the cities that surround San Mateo, because we're not an island. And I'm happy to say I have support from many of the council members in our surrounding cities, including in Foster City, Burlingame, and Belmont. And so it's important to have connectivity across our cities. Of course, I want people to live and have fun and do all the great things that they want to do in the city of San Mateo, but sometimes people do leave, and I want them to do it safely. So just to be clear, I think protected bike lanes are really important, especially for folks who are on the edge of whether or not they might ride their bike, or for occasional riders. It's really important for this to be a safe activity. People aren't going to ride their bike if it's not safe. And so I want to make sure that that's the top priority. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Sergio, you're next.
Yeah, so I am a full supporter of protected bike lanes. Just so we have a common understanding, I consider protected bike lanes as a discrete area separate from the road, that's physically separated, right? So whether that's a bollard, something that a car can't easily go over, right? Especially, trucks if you're in a non-protected bike lane, there's a normal bike lane, as trucks go by, buses go by, huge vehicles go by, it can be very daunting, and it definitely puts people off of this personal transit option. To answer the questions directly, I do not support the decision to remove protected bike lanes from any plans. I do think that protected bike lanes increase the bicycle modal transit and improve bicycle safety, right? Unfortunately, not everyone wears a helmet when they really should. And I'm not saying the city is responsible for ensuring that, their injuries are reduced, but we definitely need to make it a more approachable, more attractive option. People aren't going to ride their bikes if it's not safe, if it's not accessible. So having protected bike lanes, having lit streets, having all of these things will, again, help people to get out of their cars and get on a bike or a scooter, and to do it now, right? Not in 10 or 15 years. So that's my support, right? Fully support protected bike lanes. Thank you.
Adam.
Thank you. Yes, protected bike lanes are what we want. But from a prioritization standpoint, I want to make sure that our primary lanes are as protected as possible. So I think this was an unfortunate situation in which council decided to deprioritize bicycling in the new pedestrian mall that it made available in B Street. And so once that, I don't necessarily support that decision, but once that decision was made, now I feel that I agree it's not a huge priority to have protected bike lanes on B Street at 3rd or 5th. After all, where are you going? I think to me, what I want to make sure is that we are doing what we can to ensure that we have a network that includes protected bike lanes so that more people in our city are making choices to use a bicycle or multimodal transportation to get where they need to go in our city. Protected bike lanes are expensive. We have 0 protected bike lanes in the city of San Mateo right now. So I want to make sure that we're putting our resources toward, maybe, the Safe Routes to Schools project, for example, on Delaware Street. That's going to be a huge addition. As part of our Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission, I had a hand in our bicycle master plan update. I'd like to say that I think it's an important document to make a prioritized list of projects to inform that we want protected bike lanes and that there are indeed safety benefits from them. But I don't think, circumstances are going to change over the lifetime of the plan. And it's okay to adapt to them and make sure that we're aiming for our primary routes to be protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. And then lastly, Lisa.
Thank you, Clarissa. I think that the particular decision that City Council made was the correct one in the sense that the bigger goal was let's promote B Street as a pedestrian mall, as a cultural gathering place, as a community center. And this is the first time we've really done that in San Mateo. And I think we really need to focus on making that successful. And the council followed it up by making a very large investment in actually improving the streets and everything else to make that pedestrian mall something that people could understand the potential of. But I think protected bike lanes elsewhere make all the sense in the world. And as Rob talked about his experience in Holland, I had a similar experience when I traveled to Berlin, and just being able to ride anywhere in the city and how amazing that was. Or even closer to home, going to New York City this spring, which is about as car heavy a place as you can get. But they have over a number of years transition to some very, very big protected bike lanes that are very heavily used. And I think that that's something we can take a lesson from. How did they make that transition? Part of it is also looking at how else you flow traffic, one-way streets, really finding people who get in the grid and block the traffic when they shouldn't. I think, I learned something the other day that just surprised me, the fact that we cannot enforce speeding tickets that cause you to go to court, except on El Camino, because not all of our streets have been surveyed, and there's a requirement to survey them. That makes no sense in the world to me. I'm sure there are lots of reasons why it is the way it is, but I'd want to start unraveling things and saying, why has this decision been made, and how do we make it change so that we can be safer in our streets, so that we have the time and the effort to do the protected bike lanes. And once again, I would go look at the infrastructure or the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act, and see what funds are there to do pilots throughout the city, so that we can do it not just downtown, but in communities all across the city, so people can see the value of it, but to somebody else's point, in an integrated fashion, so that you can get from point A to point B without putting your life at risk.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, so let's pivot now to our final question. I know we have 3 minutes left, so hopefully folks can be brief on this one. Lauren, will you take this one?
Absolutely. Last climate question of the night, everybody. Berkeley's CoolClimate Network has a tool for cities that shows San Mateo's biggest potential for greenhouse gas reduction is urban infill housing. What will you do to support the development of urban infill housing? And we're going to start with Sarah.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say again, thank you to everyone who's hosting this evening, the Bike Coalition, the Climate Action Team, Move San Mateo. I really appreciate it. The Berkeley's CoolClimate Network, the tool is really cool. You can search by zip code. We have 4 zip codes in San Mateo. We often forget about one of them, but we do have 4 zip codes in San Mateo, and you can search and show the GHG, and it's sprawl and vehicle miles travel that really hit us the hardest. I live in a multifamily apartment building, and the reality is, with the scarcity of land in the city of San Mateo, the only way we will meet our RHNA numbers, our regional housing needs assessment numbers, through our housing element is through building efficient multifamily housing. I think multifamily housing is a nice way to live. I know not everyone agrees with me, and that's okay. But that's going to be the way that we meet our climate needs and the pressures to live here in San Mateo. And that's how we're going to do it in an efficient and thoughtful manner. And so when different kinds of urban infill projects have been proposed in the city of San Mateo, including in District 3, like for the Concar Passage project, which I believe is on hold, but I did support that project. And we really need to support the continuation of those kinds of projects with ground floor retail and residential above. Also work residential kinds of developments are also an opportunity that we need to look for as we try to meet the needs of this next RHNA cycle. So that's what I support. That's the way we're going to meet the needs of both the environment and what the state has asked of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Next is Sergio.
Yeah, so urban infill housing is unfortunately a controversial topic. I don't think it should be. Unfortunately, a lot of single family home owners disagree with increasing the number of units in a particular land space. We should utilize the land as much as we can, right? I'm not going to advocate to put, a 20-story apartment building next to a single family home, but I think, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, a development similar to a development that I live in, that I currently live in, are great solutions, right? We fit a lot more people into a smaller area. urban infill housing also comes with other good things, right? As we build these higher density units, we get concessions, right? We're able to have them pay for streets and sidewalk replacements, or, if the city will eventually require more resources as a result of this increased population, we can ask for concessions from the developers. So I'm not going to advocate to block urban infill housing in any way, shape, or form. I think we need to add housing, whatever it may look like, because housing is essential to this city's future. Additionally, when we add urban infill housing, we also make it more affordable, right? The key to affordable housing is adding more housing, whether that be market rate or affordable housing. As the supply goes up, it will meet the demand and the cost should go down, hopefully. So again, fully support urban infill housing and any efforts around it to make San Mateo a more denser housing area. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Adam, you are next.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. Housing policy is climate policy. And it makes sense when you think about it. We've added 16,000 jobs in our city in the last decade, but we've only added fewer than 3,000-ish housing units in that time. And so as a consequence, we have a lot of people who work here that commute here, and they're bringing their cars. They're bringing the emissions that come with those cars and the traffic congestion. What they're not bringing is a community of people who can walk to their destinations, to their grocery stores, to the other stores that they might frequent to build and maintain a local economy. And so that's where we need to turn our attention. I think it goes back to the induced demand that we were talking about earlier. Could we, in fact, increase potential demand for multimodal transportation that's lighter on the environment and reduces our traffic congestion? Could we induce demand for mass transit to get to somewhere else to work by having a greater critical mass of people who live with each other? So I would advocate for a general plan that allows for sustainable land use, circulation, and housing elements that meet our California RHNA needs by building housing near our transit hubs. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Next is Lisa.
Thank you. To carry on from what Adam said, that's what we just did in all of our community discussions around the general plan. We came up with a plan that had, I think it was 10 or 11 study zones, and really looked at how much infill we wanted to do, how much commercial, how much residential, and came up with what I think was a very good plan. I think the opportunity in San Mateo, we have a lot of older buildings, a lot of older commercial buildings. We should be looking at how do we transition some of those to housing, particularly given how people are doing more work from home. I think we also need to look at how do we do holistic development and not just say, where is the urban infill, but what is going on around it? How are we going to deal with from a water perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, from a traffic perspective? It is absolutely possible to do it, but we need to look at the whole picture. We also have a lot of small landlords in San Mateo who are using, are renting their buildings basically as their retirement nest egg. And we need to support those landlords because they typically tend to rent at a lower cost and have more relationship with their tenants. I also think looking at examples like Kiku Crossing is really exciting. We've made a commitment to build a 100% affordable housing building, which is on top of what used to be a parking lot. And so you're getting more people who are going to live downtown, who are going to bring more economic vitality, that God forbid might bring more retail back to downtown San Mateo. And I think finally, we also have to look at defining the percentages in multi-use buildings. So we really have more residential, less commercial, and see retail as an amenity. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We will end this question with Rob.
Thank you for letting me back clean up tonight. And thank you to the organizers for this event, Climate Action, Bike Coalition, and Move San Mateo. Appreciate you guys having all of us. Obviously, the only way we're going to hit our housing numbers is if we have some level of urban infill. I think the keys that we've been working through are making sure that the public is involved with the general plan and has a level of ownership and knowledge of what's coming. I think one of the very simple ways to do it for our residentials, particularly our R1 neighborhoods, is opening it up to the ability for ADUs and also splitting of large homes into potentially duplex or triplex type scenarios. We can't, we have a lot of people that are in their homes and they've been in their homes a long time and they really don't maybe utilize all of their homes. So opening it up and having programs in place to help them be able to split their home and make it into more of a duplex type environment, I think is something that we could definitely work through as a city initiative. There's also quite a few commercial buildings, both large and small, and office buildings that are not anywhere near capacity. And so we should look at slowing down the number of office buildings that we're adding and seeing if we can convert residential space and commercial space into homes or additional homes. And lastly, I think I covered all my points. Sorry, rambling through. But thank you again for having us tonight, you guys, and appreciate being able to back clean up here.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you all for attending tonight, both the candidates and our audience. We had amazing audience questions that were submitted. We're sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but we can tell you care deeply about San Mateo. Please feel free to stay in touch with all the hosting organizations. We'll try to put them in the chat for you so you can link through to our websites, but you'll also receive a follow-up email to stay in touch. That'll go out to all registered participants. Thank you, everyone. And that concludes our forum. Have a great night and be safe.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.